to Proles Pod.
Hello, and welcome to Proles Pod, your bi-weekly dose of history, politics, and culture without the liberalism. You can find and follow us on most social media platforms at Proles Pod and on TikTok at proles.pod. If you want to help us reach more people, leaving 5-star reviews on any of the various podcast catchers is the best way to do that. If you want to help us with our vision, you can subscribe to our Patreon over at patreon.com/ProlesPod. There's a lot of great stuff there, such as early access to main feed episodes, bonus episodes, theory beats, study guides, raffles, surprise drops, and more, with more on the way. This episode is brought to you by Charlie Kirk's Nakasi. Today, we're going to be asking and answering the question that plagues leftist spaces, and basically the whole world, but obviously we're communists, so this is our focus. And that question is, where are the girls? I am the only prole on the mic today, but I am joined by several delightful communist ladies and ladies adjacent. Introduce yourselves.
Hi, y'all. My name is Jen. You can call me Jen. You can call me Big Nasty. Many people do. In case you didn't know, that's my roller derby name. That's where that came from. I'm actually not big, but I'm very nasty. I'm a born and raised.
I never thought that it meant that you were big. I thought that it meant that the nasty was big. Like the spirit of nasty within you was big.
Yeah.
Thank you. That is what I meant. But a lot of people, when I would show up at a game, expected a giant woman, and I was like, "Hi." They didn't realize how much nasty there was.
That's how you get them.
That is how I get them. I'm a Texan, born and raised. You can find my podcast, How the Red Was Won, on, all of your podcast apps and on YouTube. And then if you want to harass me online, my Twitter is Keep Austin Nasty. Blue Sky is just Big Nasty. I got there early enough to just get that. And then TikTok is Big.Nasty08.
All right. Well, I am Lenore, and I co-host Workers Lit with my dear friend Jacob, fellow organizer here in Atlanta. Workers Lit is the rebranded socialist shelf. We, for 3 years now, have talked about literature, fiction, and non from a socialist Marxist-Leninist perspective. Just recently, we added another segment to the show, Unfit to Print. Jen, you're with us on that. That's our weekly news roundup. We're still doing books, but we're also doing, we're just shooting the shit each week about what's going on in the world from the perspective of people who don't have billions of dollars to spend on AI speculation.
That's nice. Okay, well, nice to meet everyone. My name is Pamela, but I usually doing most of my work in Spanish, so it's Pamela, and more specifically Pamelita because we love our diminutives. Because why not? And I work at a news show, kind of. I guess, yeah. It's like a news show online on YouTube. It's called BN Periodismo. All in Spanish. But yeah, if you want to practice your Spanish, recommended. Mostly Ecuador focused. And yeah, I also am online like Amelita. So if you want to harass there, you can.
Yay. Hi, y'all. My name is Princess Marks. I am first and foremost a professional dominatrix in Los Angeles. I also just started co-hosting a podcast called Yas Work. It is a podcast for sex workers by sex workers. It's for everyone, actually. But we interview exclusively sex workers and people who work in sex worker activism. My pronouns are she, they, ho. I'm born and raised in ex-Yugoslavia. What else should I say? Anything else I need to tell you guys here?
You
Or
will
can I
know
just-
the princess by her beautiful foot arch that I am frequently complimenting on the
Really?
internet.
You've been so kind in my comments. I really appreciate it. As we all know, we get shadow banned for all of the reasons, so the comments are much appreciated. I'll just turn it over to Rev T.
Hello, I'm a Revolutionary Thought. I'm a communist YouTuber.
I guess I also have a TikTok and Instagram, and I just made a Blue Sky. So you can find me on that. Revolutionary Thought, TH0T everywhere. And what else? What else is there about me? I'm from Russia, but I live in the US now. And yeah, I'm a communist, as are all of us.
I'm so happy to have all of our returning guests as well as the new people on the show. Thank you all so much. I'm so excited. I'm sweating so much. So obviously, for the sake of this episode, we are taking a relatively wide view regarding what it is to be one of the girls. So basically, by the way, if you're listening and you think you're one of the girls, well, you are. This includes cis women. It also includes trans women. It includes those who maybe don't feel like women but are feminized, or they are like assumed to be women when they move through the world. And although we don't have someone like this on this episode, which by the way, I would love for this to be like an ongoing series. So if you're listening and you want to join a future episode, please let us know. It also includes those who are feminized and otherwise genderqueer or gender nonconforming, because we tend to be less represented in general and also specifically in communist spaces. Which, by the way, as I was saying about genderqueer people, Rev Thought does use a they pronoun if you're referring to them. And not that I really talk about it here. And honestly, for many reasons, I'm sure will come up in this episode. So do I, at least some of the time. So it's cool if you keep that in mind. Moving into our first question. What radicalized you? How did you end up here?
Do you want us to go in the same order?
You can allow, it's like a Quaker ceremony, and you wait for the spirit to move through you.
Okay. I guess I'll go first. I won't go first every time, but I'll jump in right here. So short answer, because I feel like that question gets asked a lot, and I think it's an important question, and it's something that we should be explaining to people that we want to also radicalize. So the short answer here is the failures of liberalism are really what brought me here. I was raised more or less liberal. My mom loved Bill Clinton in the 90s, like that's what I grew up around. She's now more of like a Bernie Sanders, Liz Warren sockdom. And so sometimes we get into arguments about, because she's sort of anti-communist. They're good discussions. I love my mom. But I've been very politically active since my late teens and early 20s. My number one issue has always been women's rights, specifically the right to abortion. So I spent my 20s, rallying around that, as well as marching for queer liberation, which basically amounts to like fighting the state of Texas on everything that they tried to do to us. Lots of repressive bullshit coming from the state that I live in. I also got into anti-war protesting around like the invasion of Iraq, the occupation of Afghanistan. And I also got really into I don't know if y'all remember the big like anti-Walmart movement in the early 2000s.
Yeah.
And it was like a very anti-corporate thing, right? And I was really into that. And the most frustrating thing, like now looking back, is that nobody in any of those spaces ever handed me a copy of the Communist Manifesto or suggested that I read Lenin or Che or even Malcolm X, right? I never considered myself to be like a Democrat. They've never been radical enough for me. And I mean, they're such whiny losers, right? Like that's definitely not a group I wanted to like associate myself with. But it took me years, right, to finally even learn what socialism is and to begin studying revolutionary theory. And so when I did, it was, just like massively eye-opening, right? Like this is what I've been looking for all this time. And sometimes it makes me angry when I think back to all the time I wasted like lobbying Democrats to do better and to fight for marginalized people because, they were never going to, because that's not their job to. But now, through revolutionary theory and organizing, I have the language and the understanding of the failures of liberal democracy. And now I find it helpful to use that past frustrating experience and knowledge to pull that into this fight for liberation.
I guess I'll go next. I'm I was, like a lot of us, radicalized around 2020 and a little bit before, when it became clear that, yeah, the Democrats are just going to close ranks against even tepid, sock dem stuff like Bernie brings to the table. That's going into the total closing of ranks of our ruling class against black people, against poor people, against marginalized people that came out of George Floyd, the total allegiance of our political sphere to our carceral states. Um, and of course, the total abdication of any responsibility to combat COVID on a federal level. That was the cocktail that really tipped me over into Marxism. But I spent a couple of years really seething about it powerlessly until it was specifically the Russia-Ukraine war that sort of got me out of the house and into the streets, because I was like, okay, if this escalates and the world ends, I don't want to have, been at home at the time. So I was with the Atlanta branch of the PSL for about 3 years. We did a lot of things. We helped set up tenant unions. Last major project I was with was ballot petitioning to get Claudia de la Cruz on the ballot. She was on the ballot in Georgia. Dems sued us off for spurious and illegal reasons. Um, and I'm kind of in between phases of being out in the street. Not for any political disputes, not for any personal disputes. It's been wonderful. I just felt I was spreading myself too thin and I had to recalibrate. But here we are in the meantime.
Okay, great. I will go next. We are going in order. So well, I grew up in the States, and of course, well, as you guys live in the States, you guys know, like, yeah, basically it was like, okay, the Democrats are the only option or nothing. And then leaving the States, and I haven't lived there. I've been living in Ecuador since 2011. And then I started studying political science, and like there was less of a still, but less of a these scary words like communism and socialism. Don't say them, they're bad. And there was less of that, and still a bit, but my teachers basically said, okay, well, I mean, if we're gonna study political science, you have to read Marx and Lenin. Like that's just how it is. And there were some people that like never having read them already kind of canceled them and said, no, but my parents said that's bad, or schools have said that's bad, and we can't. It's like, well, let's read them and talk about it. And so my sociology class, and it was like, this makes sense. Didn't get radicalized enough, but it was like, okay, still an exposure to it. And then I would say that there's been a lot of protests here in Ecuador for basically reasons that happen in the rest of the world, of the top 1% of this, of also here, like taking all the wealth, being like a lot of police brutality against poor people, marginalized people, women. So I kind of started also with women's rights, because here, well, just until a couple of years ago, it was illegal to have an abortion in any case, ever, even if you were raped. So that was just recently, like, now it's legalized only in cases of rape, but still a long ways to go. So like being in the streets also radicalizes one. And then there was a very big protest in 2019 and in 2022 and just this year as well. But in those two protests, like, seeing that and being more like in the streets has also guided me towards people who weren't scared to pass out like pamphlets of the Communist Party or Communist Manifesto or political theory, and to talk about it like people who read and study and just talk about like what has been written or said. And then also like, yeah, I mean, just looking at the data of how this top 1% like accumulates this ridiculous amount of wealth, and then just this analysis of how they try to make us go against this other 1%, which is immigrants and yeah, marginalized people, instead of saying, hey, you guys have absolutely everything. And here in Ecuador, there's a lot of major cutbacks and things that we already had, like as a right one. So for example, like public health care, like all across, they're trying to take that away now. So it's like, it's those kinds of things of these like going back in a lot of rights that also it radicalizes. I mean, it should radicalize a lot of us, but yes, so that would be the way.
This is Princess Mark speaking again. I was radicalized at a quite early age, actually. First of all, I grew up in a socialist country, which apparently historians widely agree was the only successful socialist experiment. And certainly, my experience of living there was that it was the land of milk and honey. Um, Everyone was provided for, and even after the fact, even though it's ended, most people look back on it with a great degree of nostalgia. I left when I was 10 when the war started, and so my exposure to like state ideology was somewhat limited. But what I did have, and I think what really radicalized me was my dad would sit me down for like 2 3 hour lectures when I was about 9 years old. And he would preach at me about the history of Yugoslavia, the history of the Slavs, specifically the Yugoslavians, like the southwestern Slavs. We are a people who, like, up until World War I, we were under occupation for 500 years straight, and that was something that he really, wanted to impress upon me. Um, my dad was not in the Communist Party because he's kind of a nonconformist, I suppose, but he's the most, I think, actually communist socialist person I know in terms of principles and what he's committed to. Um, so, 9-year-old dad preaching like history and politics at you, like maybe isn't everyone's cup of tea. My brother was not like, he would not stay for it. But I was like, this is going to be a drag. I can tell, but I also think it's going to be important. So I'll hang in there. But that stuff really laid the foundation for me for my views. And then, at age 10, I became a refugee. A few years later, the US bombed Kosovo. Oh, sorry, Belgrade because of Kosovo. And the US interfered in the Bosnian War, where I'm from, as well. Um, and even before the wars, like, I already knew the US was like the world police and no one liked that. Like, that was very much known where I came from. Um, so I came into the US, in the mid 90s with all that as my history. Um, And so I never viewed the Democrats or the Republicans. I sort of view them as the same, right? Because in the world they behave as one representative of this hegemonic state. Um, and I've gone through different waves. I think during the Obama years, I allowed myself to be seduced into all that hopey changey shit. And then very quickly it became evident that he was, deporter in chief and drone executioner in chief, and um, the veil came off pretty quickly. But yeah, it's been up and down waves of like, what do I really think of the politicians running this country? And I didn't pay attention in any of my government classes here in high school and middle school. I would learn the stuff for the tests, do well on the tests, and then immediately forget it. It was like my weird apathy and like refusal to like understand this government, because that I worried that I think subconsciously I worried that would make me like sympathetic to it, you know. I didn't want to know how Congress worked because at the end of the day they're going to bomb you. Like if they see something that they like in your country, they're going to bomb you. So anyway, that's the long story ish.
Oh, I guess it's my turn. Yeah, I totally relate to the whole like it was like an up and down wave, just all over the place. I feel like I want to say I've been a socialist since I was 12, but at that time I really thought that socialism was just like universal healthcare and everyone has access to housing and free education and all that. But I always believed in that. I guess it's some sort of epigenetic thing because my parents literally got paid to go to university in the
Mhm.
Soviet Union and they had free healthcare and they had, all the nice benefits of living under a socialist state. So I don't know. It was like something that I always felt was correct. I always knew was correct. And yeah, I guess just throughout my lifetime, I've also like had periods of buying into Democrat ideology. Obama's hope and change for sure, yeah. And in 2016 with the Bernie campaign, I remember being like, "Oh my God, like he could really change America for the better." Yeah, so that didn't work out, obviously. And I feel like when 2020 rolled around with the government's mishandling of COVID and the George Floyd Black Lives Matter protests and all that, I was like, whoa, like I have been a socialist, but I feel like I don't actually know as much as I think I do. I need to start reading theory. I need to like really get into this. So I read Lenin, started reading more Marx and stuff. I actually read the Communist Manifesto when I was like in high school, but I think it was in the hopes of quote unquote debunking it because I was kind of an edgelord back then. And like, girl, you can't fucking debunk it. You don't have a job. You don't know how work works. But anyway, like, yeah. So yeah, once 2020 rolled around, I really like dedicated myself to my ideological studies
Mm.
because I was like it's I like didn't know that communist theory really existed up until that point, which is kind of funny because again, my Soviet roots, and yet, and yeah, so since then I've been studying Marxist theory, and yeah, and I guess also as a kid, just the pattern recognition, like noticing that there were other kids who were really smart that I would talk to. Like I had friends who were really brilliant, but they just had really bad grades and were failing in school because their family was living in poverty. Their house was going to foreclosure. And I was like, well, this just doesn't seem fair. This doesn't seem right. So, yeah, really just a bunch of pattern recognition combined with epigenetic knowing that people deserve to have all their material needs met,
What a
combined
wild
with
idea.
the realization that Democrats are not going to save us.
I really love the phrase. Did you say intergenerational? No, epigenetic. What did you call? What did you say?
Yeah, epigenetic.
Epigenetic. What? Epigenetic something.
Epigenetic knowing, I guess.
Knowing. Yes, I love that. It's essentially it's indigenous knowledge, right? Like all of us at some
Mhm.
point lived this way. All of us as communal beings were concerned with having the basic needs of our community met. This is like human life 101. And we're now like so far from that in this model of living and ruling.
Yeah.
I love that
Yeah,
I
phrase.
absolutely.
I think as well as like when you have that sort of like ambient learning, right? Because that was your material conditions, the environment in which you grew up, and having a family that like endorses it, right? Is like
Mm.
this can lead you to taking these things for granted versus like unfortunately what a lot of like degenerate Westoid children such as myself grow up with the understanding that like oh things are hard and things aren't fair and you just have to do your best and there really aren't answers and actually you should just go to church if you're looking for those but if you want them in the real world
Yeah, just keep your head
Yeah.
it's
down,
just that like you
listen
need
to the
to work
powers that
harder.
be.
You're just sort of plunged
Mhm.
into a contradiction that cannot be resolved from a very young age. And like I do think that it has a sort of like psychic damage that it does to children when you just learn that like, well, that's just how it is, right?
100%.
Mhm.
I was 12 when I came here, and I feel like so it's been like over 30 years. Um, and I still feel like I've been forced, like I didn't grow up with that, and on a daily basis I experience resistance to that, but I still feel like I've accepted that like default setting of like you just have to work harder and that's going to change things. And of course the reality is my working harder doesn't change anything about my material conditions, right? Like only in a very limited amount. But
Mhm.
like even though I didn't grow up here, I've been inculcated, I've been, like, indoctrinated with that baloney, you know?
Okay, so a little thank you all so much for sharing these stories. It's actually really interesting because even though you're all like my friends, I didn't know all of this. And there's like so many interesting resonances as well. I like attracts like I suppose. I've already told the story of how I was radicalized. Coaching made me a communist. My favorite life coach is Vladimir Lenin. I've told the story before on Rev Left. You can go back and listen to that episode if you want to. But I'd like, if we can, to shift a little bit and talk about what our experiences have been when we are in specifically communist spaces, right? Because the question that we're examining today is like, where are the girls, right? Like we as communists, like we have the best answer, and when we don't have the answer, we have the framework for asking the best questions, and yet it seems to be a real boys club in a lot of situations. And so I would like if you all can speak about your experiences in communist spaces, if there's anything relevant that you feel like you have to share.
I will kick us off. As I was saying, I prefer to kick balls, but I will kick us off. My biggest gripe with men in, I'm gonna say hard leftist spaces in general, is that, all of arriving at this place in your politics is usually comes through an examination of your all your various privileges, your conditions of living. And so often I find that the men have not examined their gender privilege, their sexual privilege. Like, I mean, I shouldn't say that we use the word sexual privilege, but they just haven't examined the role of their sex and their gender. And, secondarily, as a sex worker, I find that many leftists and communists and anarchists, men and women included, haven't examined their views on sex work, of course, but especially the men, right? So my first crime is usually being a woman with opinions. Or I mean, they're not mean about it, right? They just like don't think about gender issues, even though gender issues are like part and parcel of Marx's writing, Marx and Engels' writing.
No, it puts me in mind certainly of when you go from one mainstream political tendency or no political tendency to another, like if you're apolitical or if you're some vague, like squishy form of liberal, right? And then you do some reading, you see the contradictions in the world of politics and at home when like what your parents say they hold like conflicting beliefs that don't like really line up like super cleanly. When you move from one of those mainstream tendencies to being a socialist, suddenly all the chauvinisms sort of come out of the woodwork. The assumptions that that neoliberalism tells us to make about the world start being a little more glaring to you. And having moved now from, I started, as a cis man in my organizing experience, and about a year and a half into that, realized that no, I'm actually a trans woman. Moving from that to that, there's a parallel there. Suddenly you notice the way people look at you. Suddenly you notice the way people treat you. And I was lucky enough not to have any of that friction in my organizing space. Certainly, our branch was just part of the interview process is like, okay, if trans rights are human rights, if you don't believe that, fuck off. Really, what changed overnight for me
Mm.
was, doing outreach and talking to strangers. I had never had anybody put their hands on me before I transitioned. I'd never had anybody, yell at me in front of a crowd before I transitioned.
Mm,
Um, I
mm.
swear they can smell it in the water too. Like 4 days
Wow.
after I came out, like before any of this that you see, it was the first time I was catcalled. So like it's
Goddamn.
not necessarily organizing qua organizing that the one has come up against the other. My gender has come up against my politics and how I move through that world, but moving through the world itself has been the core sort of contradictions I've had to navigate.
Okay, I'll jump in. I have a feeling that my experience is going to be a little bit different. When I first joined communist spaces, I was like immediately put into leadership. Um, and in a lot of ways, I do take that as a compliment. I've been a team captain multiple times throughout the years, and I often do find myself either placed into or like elected into leadership roles. I think a lot of that is just based on my personality. I'm fucking loud. I am very outspoken, very opinionated. I'm very blunt. And I hate the front. I tell it like it is, but like I just like I don't. I'm from the South, but I did not come with a lot of the "oh bless your heart" kind of shit, right? Like I just and some people really hate me for it, but I think most people, at least throughout my life, appreciate that about me. So when I joined CPUSA, Communist Party USA, in 2021, within like 4 months of joining, I was made co-chair of the Austin chapter. And now I do think in some ways that is because I'm a woman, because the party lacks female cadre and specifically in leadership roles. So I joined and I had already been studying theory for a while, and I'm again this loud opinionated person, and they're like, "Oh, we're going to put her into leadership." So a few years after that, in the summer of 2024, our entire chapter left the party. You can read about that on our Substack. But our whole cell left the party, and we rebranded ourselves as a mutual aid organization called Red Help ATX. And I just continued on as the chair from there. In fact, we're right now in the middle of elections, and no one's challenged my position. I think again that's partially a compliment and partially because it's a lot of fucking work and nobody wants to do it. So like if I'm willing to do it, they're happy to let me. So like yeah, in a lot of ways I do feel like an equal in these spaces, but also like more than an equal because I have been in leadership the entire time I've been in specifically communist organizing spaces. And I've been really, I think, lucky in that way. Like our group is mostly male. And we'll get into that more. There's some more questions coming up about that kind of stuff. But like, I literally, like, I sometimes I'm just like, oh, it's big nasty and the boys, you know, in so many ways. But like, I haven't had really any issues with any of the boys in this organizing space here. And again, I've been very lucky, and I'm also an asshole, and I do think some of them are afraid of me, and
Yes.
that works to my advantage
Make them
as
afraid.
well. Yeah, keep those boys scared. That's right. You're gonna have to tell me how to get into this dominatrix stuff, because it sounds very appealing to me.
This is a separate episode that you can find by joining our Vanguard tier at patreon.com/pearlspod.
That's fucking awesome that that's been your experience. And I think this is Marks again. It isn't necessarily representative. I want to ask you a follow-up question. Um, so they have accepted you, which is amazing. Is it also the case? Do you also feel that they understand gender dynamics, gender expansiveness, all apart from accepting you because of who you are, you're a powerhouse. Do you feel that they apply the same kind of I don't know, just thoughtfulness to gender and sexuality at large?
Yeah, I actually do think so. It's a small group. Like, to be honest, I think we have 14 or 15 official members in our group. It's very small. And then we have a wider group of just like volunteers. We do have a lot of non-binary comrades. Some of them were assigned female at birth. Some of them were assigned male at birth. So we do have a lot of people that are kind of in that like gender gray area. And I feel like, I mean, none of them have ever come to me that they've had any problem. People are very good about using correct pronouns, and I, as far as I know, at least, and I hope that they would come to me if they did have a problem, because they know that I would put the beat down on the person that was being terrible to them. And then even when we were still part of CPUSA, we did a lot of work with PSL, and the local Austin PSL was chaired by a trans woman, and so we had really good working relationship with her and with that group in general. And you know, for being in
Yeah.
fucking Texas, I think it is very special that these, you know, quote unquote left or communist organizing spaces have been very, very good when it comes to like the gender question. And I recognize that we're very lucky in that fact, because I know that's not true for everybody, even in these same exact organizations in other cities.
So I'm too disabled to go out in the world and organize, which is why most of my stuff that I do is online. So yeah, so when people are like, "You're chronically online," I'm just like, "Shut up, ableist motherfucker." But like, I
Hashtag not all men.
experience a lot of this like class reductionism on the internet, and I swear, dude, like communist men literally seem to think, not hashtag not all men, but always a man, seem to think they seem to think that like if you have an identity, quote unquote, basically if you're anything outside of the default of like cishet white man, then you're a liberal. Then you have to like
Mhm.
prove that you're a communist. Like literally, I should honestly stop reading my comments, but I love taking psychic damage a little bit as a treat. And so many of them are just people being like, okay, liberal, when I'm over here being like, we need to seize the means of production. None of this can get done without socialism and without a revolution. And it's like, what? Like, it's wild to see how people apply their preconceived notions of what an quote unquote identity is onto a person, just because they think that in order to be a true Marxist you need to, like, I don't know, be like an academic white man that speaks with authority and is very proper and all that, which, like, not everyone's going to be like that, and that's like the beauty of Marxism.
Almost as if you've like gone
The quote unquote
beyond
post
identity
race
politics.
society.
It's almost as if like, oh yeah, I've gone beyond that. So I have realized and been enlightened that race and gender and sex has nothing to do with anything. And it's
Yeah,
like,
except it is,
Yeah,
because
that's, I feel like sometimes.
yeah.
hmm We have a reading list in our group, and the second book on it, Angela Davis's Women, Race, and Class. And I think this is such an important analysis to keep people from falling into that class reductionism, because the whole thing is about how those three things are interconnected, right? And I think every cishet white man must read this fucking book.
Yeah, absolutely, that's a great book.
You heard it here. Read the book. Okay, if we're ready, I want to dive into the big chunk. Guys, I'm so nervous, but like, where are the girls? Like,
Mhm.
why aren't there more girls?
I wrote out an answer to this one because the question posed was why don't girls like communism? and so I think first of all the girlies do like communism, but the lack of women that we find in these organizing spaces, I think is twofold, right? I mentioned how even in our group we really struggle to recruit like women and femmes, and we have a few, but it's less than half. It might be like 20%. There's like 3 of it. Like it's not a lot. A lot of it is because the spaces are male dominated, and it's the same reason that I think we also have a harder time recruiting black and brown comrades into these spaces as well. When somebody shows up and it's a room full of men, I mean, most of the girlies don't necessarily want to be in a room full of men. And I think the same thing where a black comrade shows up and it's a room full of white people and they don't necessarily want to be in a room full of white people. So it's one of those problems that kind of just like continues to self perpetuate, right? Men join, more men join, and then it's just like a boys club. And I think the second reason that that keeps happening is, like, obviously we live under like patriarchy, right? So like the girlies are quite often the ones that are tasked with raising the children. And so the women in our group right now are childless by choice, like myself. In fact, most of our comrades are childless. And I think that's, part of the reason is that millennials just aren't having kids because we're broke. But also, like, it is a lot of work. Like, we dedicate a lot of time to this mutual aid work that we do. And we have literally one official comrade that has a teenage child that he sometimes brings, because that he's like 15, right? And he's old enough to like come along and understand what's happening. Because organizing takes up so much time, and the women, the mothers specifically, are tasked with raising the kids, they just don't have a lot of time for this. And like there are ways around this, and I think the Black Panthers in a lot of ways kind of worked through this problem. And I don't know exactly what their numbers were. I have a feeling it was still mostly men, but I know that they worked really hard to get more women involved and put women in leadership in that organization. And part of it is, have things like that set up so that people can bring their children and have a safe place for them while they are doing this work. And part of that is just like having money and space and things that are really hard to come by. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I think in addition to that, right, some of it is,
Right.
I mean, first you've sort of already touched on this, Jen McNasty, that like party politics and doing this kind of movement is not convenient for anyone, because like organizing and building a militant communist movement is not convenient. But to the extent that they are convenient, they tend to be more convenient for, as you said, childless people and people without caretaking responsibilities, which tends to fall on women, and not being able to offer childcare. And then I think ableism is also in many ways tied to gender, as women and people assigned female at birth are disproportionately impacted by like many, many, many chronic illnesses, as well as if you are the one that is going to have to go home and take care of children or elders who are then also more likely to be immunocompromised. And then there's like an organization and they are not interested in masking or taking other safety precautions or taking other disability accommodations. It's like those are the people that even if they want to join are going to be incapable of doing so.
I have a speculative thing. I notice last few years, last like let's say 5 years, a lot of the men who are coming into hard leftist spaces are coming in because they feel frustrated, they feel alienated. It's sort of adjacent to the male loneliness epidemic, and that's a whole other can of worms I won't get into. But I wonder, by practice, women and women identified people often have support networks in place just because of the way we relate to one another and because we're socialized to relate that way, and men don't have that. So I wonder if there's like this thing where like women already have support networks set up and men don't, and so they're gravitating to places where they have real human needs, and these leftist spaces accomplish some of that for them.
I think that this is related for a lot of different reasons. One, I think it is and can be I don't necessarily want to say a problem, but it is certainly a vulnerability to lean on your organizing space for your friend group. However, under capitalism, when so many of us have so many demands on your time, literally the time that you are spending doing party work is the time that you would otherwise be spending with your friends. And I think another reason that is challenging, I think you're right, Princess Marks. I don't really know, but I think that there's probably truth to that, that in addition to a vision for a world that they want to live in, there's also a social need that they are seeking for and may not have the relational skills to be able to sustain that. And I think that another problem, again, obviously I'm married and I'm married to a communist. And so I'm not speaking from firsthand experience, but just from anecdotal stories from my friends in the US as well as in other parts of the world. Many parties do not have an effective and satisfying stance or answer. And I don't know what it is. So I'm not trying to like shit on anyone. I think it's very complicated and really dependent on where you live. But like we're all here and we don't really have time for other relationships. And so what happens when we end up dating and what happens when that goes badly? I think that that's like another contributing factor to what it is like if you join an organization for people of any gender, right? Because relationships can end in all kinds of ways. But in terms of like retaining someone to participate in the party, like I do think that that is a contributing factor. And I'm not saying that I think the party's responsibility is to mediate that. I'm just saying that I do think that it's a real thing that happens that makes it hard for people to continue if especially that is the majority of the social time that they have outside of work and family and other demands.
My take is a little bit different. I really believe that if there's going to be a revolution, it's going to be part of community. I feel like the Panthers did this, if I understand correctly. Like they saw their politics as part and parcel of their community, and part of being in a community is navigating separations, especially romantic
Absolutely.
separations, and and being able to stay in community. You can't always do that, of course. I'm sort of like village minded, right? Like I would in an ideal world, the people I organize with would be my village. If I had kids, I could bring them to the meeting and there would be one
Of
person
course,
who's
of
doing the
course.
childcare that day for all the kids. For me, an ideal organizing situation would actually be much more inclusive as a communal space. You're talking realistically, what happens? We live in the West. We're used to being
I guess also what I meant was like whether or not it is the party, capital T, capital P's responsibility to mediate those kinds of conflicts is what I meant. That I was like, I don't know that like a policy fixes that. It's just that like, and I think that you're right. It comes down to dejective Westoids and our atrophied relational skills. I think that you're right to a certain point. And I think that it maybe comes from a sort of like a liberal place to want to put a policy in place to avoid what I said on my last episode with Jen Big Nasty. I'm really sorry to our listeners. I love you all so much, but I really do think this. The amount of labor that the rest of the world has to do, because primarily men, but of course it can happen to people of all genders, lack relational skills and emotional intelligence. And so we have to make policies and we have to find solutions and we have to find answers. But the actual fact remains is that we are contorting ourselves in our communities or absence of communities to make up for the fact that not everybody who's here is intellectually and emotionally mature enough to be doing what the movement requires of us.
I just want to take a moment to invoke bell hooks and remind ourselves that it is not simply men who are relationally challenged. It is also the women, those of us women who raise them, who mother them, who sister them, who relationship with them, and being relationally challenged, right? Like there are many ways that women reinforce the system. I'm not saying this absolves men of the responsibility. Like when you have some sort of challenge, you should work to overcome it, blah, 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 whatever. But, just to give your listeners a little bit of a reprieve also, I think both of these things are true at the same time, sometime femme supremacist. So just think how far I've come.
Calling it a form of liberalism, right? I'm right there with you, definitely. I mean, I think Mao calls it out in Combat Liberalism, right? One of the things that he says is, don't ask sacrifices of the organization that you in turn wouldn't be able to reciprocate, right? And relational issues, not being able to parse like your personal life, your friendships versus your party work, like letting those come into conflict, like that's something that the party cannot solve. That's something that you have to fix before you insert yourself into the spaces. And yeah, absolutely, there's gonna be a bunch of men who cannot because of what patriarchy says that they are owed.
And maybe the way around that, you all remember like a couple years ago that It's always DSA New
Oh,
York. That
yes!
they're
Oh,
always
so
they're always doing some
cringe.
fuck shit, man. And they had a Valentine's mixer that they called Trots and
Yes,
Thoughts.
I
Do y'all
remember
remember
this.
that?
Oh
Yes.
God.
And there was a huge
God, that's so
it
embarrassing.
was so cringe. There was a huge pushback against it. And like on one hand, like I understand what they're trying to do, right? They're like, we want people to have these revolutionary relationships. And I think that's obviously going way too far in that direction. But I
That's a
think
great way to get women on in your org. Just call them thoughts. Yeah, just hey sluts. Yeah,
I mean, you
Oh, hit
call
him right in the
yourself
knuckles.
I'm
one.
thought adjacent.
But I feel that this whole thing of like, why aren't the girls staying, going back to that question is for me, there's like a lot of this whole obligation, I guess, from some spaces, like kind of what Big Nasty Jen was saying earlier, of like, for me in this news station that I'm working at now, that is leftist, they're not Marxists yet, hopefully. But they have this thing of like, we need a girl. So like we need a girl on our show because we are progressive and we are leftist. So like we can't just have a show and not have a girl. And you're a girl, so please be here. And like yes. So like there is a lot of this whole token thing happening, and I feel like at least here in Latin America it happens a lot as well, because then there's like this whole
You're the
like
token.
token and quotas thing is happening a lot in a lot of spaces. And like you still see even in those more progressive and left wing spaces, it's like episode after episode after episode, it's like every single person they invite on their show or on their podcast or whatever, it's like just a man after a man after a man after a man after a man. And it's like, seriously, you couldn't find anyone else to talk about politics except another cis white man, like well mestizo here, which is like the dominating norm. But like it's just like, wow, really, you can't, no, there's no other option. So there's just like this whole it's happening not only of course in communist spaces, but also just in general and in most spaces, that it's like, we need a woman, we cannot continue without a woman, get one. And so of course that's hard. It's hard to stay. It's hard to stay when you feel like that's the situation. And it's hard too because you see these like sexist practices like working and reworking over and over again, for me, like in a very
Mhm.
Latin family, which there are things that I love about it, dancing, but there are things that I don't love as much, which is like this whole machismo culture that it's like, no, women should not have opinions about politics and women should not speak about this. And if you're a woman, it's like, and you do speak about this and you are loud and you interrupt and you have your opinion, it's like, we're gonna wait until a guy says it right after you and then we'll believe it. Like you'll say it and then he'll say it right after you, exactly what you said in other words, and then we'll validate
Mhm.
it. So that happens a lot. So like you have to really persevere and just, I don't know, be like, I don't, like very stubborn and be like, no, like we need to be here. But it's not like a piece of cake. And then usually because of that, you are tasked to have those responsibilities that aren't as great. Like I was in a podcast before and it was four other guys and myself, and I usually had those responsibilities that none of them wanted to do, which is like admin work, a lot of admin work that it's like they're kind of like, but you're good at that. And it's like, no, I'm just like, someone has to do it. So of course I have to do it because I'm a woman. So I'm like in this loophole of, if I don't do it, then no one does it. And it needs to get done because we need this to function. But at the same time, I'm also kind of being led on this responsibility because I'm a woman. The whole thing about the relationships, I feel like the relationship thing for me, and I really like what Princess Marks was saying, but I feel like communities should be able to solve things about a community. So of course relationships are going to happen, and I for me it's like the camaraderie and kind of um organizing comes before a relationship. So like I feel like people should develop the social skills in a community to be able to navigate life, and that is one of those aspects of life. So like we should be able to do that. What I do feel that is very western is this whole idea of like maybe more okay, we break up and so now they're like canceled from spaces, or like I guess like there's less of this whole justice mindset, like of repair. So like how do we find these mechanisms of repair so that the community stays as a community? It's more of in this individualism, of course, and liberalism as well, going hand in hand, of like, okay, there's a problem, and so I'm going to just solve the problem, and this person is not in my life anymore, or we discontinue going to those spaces. There's less of that. We are a community, so let's repair. Like, and we need to learn how to do that repair. And in one of these, I think it's the first chapter of this book, which is like how to be a revolutionary, it talks about how it is very important for us, like, not to like get distracted by like that main upper like goal, and like, I don't know, kind of buy into this, okay, we have a problem, so leave, but more of this repair. So that's something that like I feel like need to kind of not be afraid to dive into again, and how to do that repair as a community.
I think that we've shifted in many spaces from the cancellation model to the restorative justice model, which is great. And I think if we think about this in a historical context, back in the day, communities were sort of self-sustaining, and you very rarely ejected someone permanently from the community, right? Like the default setting is like, let's repair this. And sometimes it included punishments or consequences that today would be considered whatever bad. Personally, I am a fan of some
Mm.
corporal punishment, even in, in my professional work, but also if you rape someone, should we exile you or should we beat the shit out of you and make you think twice the next time, you know? The West is hyper individualistic. Spaces are big enough that you can exile someone and like they'll find some other place to go. And it's also the cultural practice norm. In other spaces, that's not like your community is small and like your survival depends on that community,
It's
right? And
also
so
not just
today,
back in the day,
yeah.
right? A lot of the world still lives like this. I do want to say, though, I think that as a result of those material conditions, when you grow up in a tightly knit community, you have stronger relational skills. And as a result, because we have grown up in
Mm.
such deeply alienating material conditions, again, degenerate Westoids, we have different problems, right? Like the degree of degeneracy and like sex pestery that like I
Mhm.
know firsthand from people that close friends of mine, it like I hear you, and broadly I agree with that. And also I'm like, I think of people that I'm like, yeah, exactly, like he should have his ass kicked, or he should really not be welcome, or how like it's not just we had a romance, it deteriorated, we were not compatible in that way in the long term. It is like, this is a person. And I'm sorry, men, if you don't know this, there's a large percentage, I mean, I'm not saying it's probably like 3%, but that's a lot. We're a small group of people. If it's 3 men out of 100, I'm just guessing here, but like they use these spaces to find women. And I'm really glad that nobody has on this call had a firsthand story. And I know a lot of them. And I know Princess Marks knows a lot of them because she and I have had a conversation about it before. I'm not going to tell those stories because they're not mine to tell. But like sex pestery is rampant. And they get away with this, and they can continue to behave in this way because they're relying on the fact that like you may be less likely to believe a woman comrade or to believe a queer comrade. And like I think one of the problems is like, again, the function of establishing a socialist state is that we can overcome our social backwardness. It does not mean that we have to already be there in order to develop it. And that's obviously true. And I'm not expecting that of everyone. And also, I do think that we, as the enlightened communists, lovers of the immortal science, sometimes tend to think that we're woker than we really are, right? Which leads to the aforementioned dismissing of the gender question, the race question, the ableist question, all of these kinds of things. I mean, the fact that like we still have not moved past the language of the worker, the worker, the worker, everything is about the worker, when like 2 people on this call right now are so disabled that we can't have jobs. Maybe more of you. I'm sorry
They
if
have
I
to be
didn't. I'm
very
speaking
strange,
about me and
though.
Rev Thought, right? Like that, it's like we are, you already said it, so I didn't feel like I was outing you. Can I share 2 more strange
Please.
things? Is it okay? Honestly, like I feel comfortable to say this because of the people that are on this call. And I also want to name, some of it is like, I'm a fragile Victorian child. I just keep saying this. I really have no business putting myself in public. I know that. But like the reason that I feel scared to share these things is that like I do get a disproportionate amount of the backlash when people critique our show. It is like very obvious that people critique me and they critique Tony. And it might be because Justin and Jeremy were the OGs and they were there first and people are more attuned to their voices and to their style. Or it might be because I'm not a dude and Tony's black.
He's also Canadian, though, to be fair.
okay, yeah. Well, so I have two things. I have two things that I want to say about where the girls are. The tiniest building block on which fascism is constructed is, in essence, the nuclear family, right? Obviously, ideally, the white cishet reproductive family. And if you remember, as I know all of you listen to every single episode I put out, the Reform or Revolution episode where I said government is wife, basically that like it's the government's job not to have to make a profit so that the state can make a profit, right? All the way down from the nuclear family, all the way up to the national and international level where business is daddy and government is mommy, fascism reproduces this model over and over again, yeah? So obviously this model is insane. And if you think about it for 2 seconds, you realize it's a terrible idea. But instead of giving people those 2 seconds to think critically, they whipped people into a frenzy, an emotional state, and sold them on a sort of aesthetic. And part of this aesthetic was predicated on performing like quote unquote appropriate masculinity or femininity. So Stalin, I don't remember if I said this on the eras or not, but something that I personally think Stalin did incredibly well was even when the rest of the left was like just like right now looking at fascism and being like, what the actual fuck, who would ever fall for this is so stupid, Stalin was able to see what people needed, and he was also able to see at least what they thought they were getting from fascism. Yes. So he and the Bolsheviks became interested in this project, this attempt to encourage people to become new Soviets, right? But not just new Soviet humans per se, right? The new Soviet man, the new Soviet woman, the new Soviet family. And this is, I think, in a direct response to his material conditions, to the moment of the time, including the influence of fascist gender ideology, that, by the way, decades later, most people think is just fact. It's just the water we swim in, right? It's the microplastics in our balls. And here's where it gets tricky. Okay, here's what I think. On some level, some communist men have internalized that story, that same fucking Nazi story from 100 years ago. That socialism is feminine and feminized and therefore less valuable, and that fascism is masculine. And rather than just rejecting that premise and all of the presuppositions that are tied to it, there is a latent tendency, I think, within many men to deny that and to denounce it and to try to prove that socialism can also be masculine. And this leads to doubling down on denying and ignoring women and feminized people's experiences. I think it leads to deprioritizing communication skills, emotional intelligence skills, conflict de-escalation and resolution skills. And it sort of relegates these things to more like anarchist or even liberal spaces, because obviously if it has to do with yourself as an individual and becoming more mature, it has to be liberalism, right? In favor of what they would say, quote unquote, building a party. But the consciousness of the rest of the masses in the last 100 years has evolved. And when usually it's like cishet men fail to adjust for this, they continue to lose potential comrades. They continue to fail to influence people to our cause, to the correct cause. And then they look around and they ask themselves, the title of this episode, where are the girls? But they never not once stop to ask what their behavior has to do with this outcome. That is what I think. The other thing I think, to quote my friend, a real man, Alex Herbert, he was actually on Tony's other podcast, Actually Existing Socialism, talking about something else, but you should really go read his Substack because he has this piece called, I think the title is We Need a Weird Marxism. And he uses things like horror as a genre. He talks about astrology, tarot, that which we may call the occult. And he just says pretty plainly, we need our movement to be welcoming and interesting for actual people and their actual interests. And I will say, this is something that I've said many times, both to my own co-hosts, as well as a result of like men that I've met through the show. Rev Thought and I were just texting about astrology for like 4 hours, like 2 days ago. And I will get men mostly who tell me that it's stupid. And I can feel the tension, right? Because especially if they know me through the show or if they know me through in-person organizing back when I was physically capable of doing that, it's like, I'm me, I'm that Ray, right? I'm a tanky's tanky, right? Like that, I'm a real one. But here I am being like, can I see your Chiron? Can you tell me your birth information? Can I look at your transits? And this creates a sort of conflict for them. And they want to criticize this. And I always say the same thing, which is like, if you can demonstrate to me how my interest in astrology, like as an example, hinders my ability to meaningfully engage with dialectical and historical materialism, to correctly like analyze the present moment in the hopes of changing the future, like if you can show me how this is happening, I'm very open to that. But if you can't, and you just don't want me to like astrology because you don't like it or because you think it's impossible to have some esoteric interest and to remain a rational person, then like actually you are the one who is dogmatic. You are the one who
Mhm.
is unable to see things clearly for what they are and to assess people and situations on a case by case basis, which is required for materialism. That is not my problem. And so, all back to sort of what I was saying before about Alex's article on weird Marxism, you can learn to be careful. You can learn to think critically, right? I don't tell you to give up sports. I don't tell you to give up video games, but those things have been deeply influenced by capitalism and can absolutely hinder your critical thinking skills if you're not careful. But you can learn to be careful. And we can't just constantly tell people that their interests are stupid. And I'm sorry, but it
Mhm.
happens more with feminized interests. Spaces need to be welcoming. We need to stop pretending that our cultural preferences are inherently like Marxist or not Marxist. We need a weird Marxism, and we need to welcome as many people as possible to our movement, including the girls. Those are my two thoughts.
Hell yeah.
Hell yeah.
There's this very like male dominated thing that has happened since the whole enlightenment, which is like all of
So it's
these
been a minute.
binaries. Enlightenment, yeah, it's been a minute, but they're like obsessed. That's like the Roman Empire. So they like have these binaries, and one of those binaries, like these duos that they put like over everything else, it's like the intellect, which they feel like they own, versus also emotion. And so like a lot of these feminized interests that they consider to be like these feminized interests, they kind of categorize them into like these more emotion things. So and like emotion is under intellect and rationale. So like I feel that in a lot of spaces in general, including communist spaces, but there's like that whole idea of, well, no, because this is rational, this and what I think and what I feel and my interests are rational, are intellectual, and therefore superior to these other emotional things. And I think without a lot of self-awareness, there is like that whole superiority that has happened since then, but like they don't want to accept it, because then if accepting it would indirectly accept like that more sexist idea, and accepting that no, emotions are not inferior, or these interests that are feminized are not inferior, and you are not superior or more than because you have like also fell for this dichotomy that has happened since enlightenment.
I just want to acknowledge for especially the male listeners that anger is also an emotion. I think a lot of people who fall prey to this notion that emotion is bad, and anger is actually maybe one of the worst emotions to give over to, but it is accepted and considered rational or whatever, especially like communist rage, right? Like that is a feeling and it's justified because our conditions suck, but that doesn't mean that any other response to our conditions or life in general is bad, you know? It is literally a material condition. Like emotions are a material condition of our lives.
Absolutely.
There is a dampening effect, I think, that liberalism has. As regards anger specifically, there's a dampening effect that liberalism has that tells you to distrust the evidence of, we have our issues with Orwell, of course, but distrust the evidence of your eyes and ears, Like, I remember being told this specifically growing up in my, Blue Dog Democrat household. If you see something that makes you angry, do a little more digging. To a degree, yes, that is true. You see something, you want to get the context behind it, you want to investigate it. We've mentioned this. But that so easily gets twisted into just asking questions, right? That so easily gets twisted into the debate bro culture of, okay, well, let's break this down and quote unquote understand it, which is always a cover for rationalizing it. I'm thinking specifically of police brutality has been on my mind, why our carceral state is set up the way it is. And you can come up with any rationale in the world for why police do what they do, but it comes down to one simple truth, which is that they are descended from slave
Yes.
catchers and still serve that function. Not just to super exploit people for their labor, but specifically to disrupt communities and to prevent them from organizing in the first place. And when you learn about that, it makes you angry. It makes you want to set things on fire. And you have to be allowed to sit with that and have that and have that inform your worldview, certainly pushing you in any adventurous direction, but absolutely have that in your quiver.
I think also in regards to emotions, I think communist men are okay with feeling that justified anger, but they don't necessarily process it and then they will take it out on others. Like, I don't know. I get so many annoying comments from communist men in particular because they're just like, oh, you have an identity, you're a liberal. Because they're obviously, they're mad at the system, but they're taking it out on me because I'm
Right.
not their idealized form of what a communist should look like. And so much of that, I think, is because they haven't grieved the losses that come with understanding that, like, you live under capitalism. Your life is not what it could have been if you lived in a system where everyone gets their needs met. You need to grieve those losses. You need to be sad. You need to be angry. You need to process that. And then you need to do the work. Like, you need to actually do shit with it.
And I think that to tie this into something that Princess Mark said earlier about these kinds of emotional immaturities and limitations impacting people of all genders, which I certainly think is true, this is the nature of, I guess, what we could call like the responsibility of having privilege. The fact that like anyone can be emotionally immature, anyone can lash out on anyone else, but it is because of the inherent, deeply entrenched violence of patriarchy that non-men are more likely to be at risk of the harms that arise as a result of somebody's emotional immaturity if that emotionally immature person is a man. Again, not to say that, hey, you can be a menace. Listen, listener, you can be a menace of any gender. I want you to write that down. Don't let the men have it all. You can be a menace of any gender, right? You can be emotionally mature of any gender. You can be fucked up with any gender, right? That's absolutely true. And also, the nature of patriarchy is such that the damage can also be much larger. And if you're a man and you walk through the world with that privilege, you also need to wear the responsibility of what that means. You know?
I'm changing my name to Lady Menace.
Ooh. Okay, if it's okay, if it's okay, I'd like to move into the next topic. And the topic is broadly work experience. And I would like to speak first to the sexy and beautiful elephant in the sexy and beautiful closet. And that is that it is a given today that one of our guests is a sex worker. And I understand that many people have very strong opinions regarding sex work and the sex trade more broadly. And before we got on the mic today, in case somebody is waiting for this giant 6-hour conversation to ensue, I spoke with all of our guests as well as with my co-host, and we made the decision that rather than discussing this more in depth, only because it's literally not the focus of the episode, I do want to say this. Whatever you hope for the future, whether that is certain types of reform, whether that is a cultural revolution that shifts relational dynamics and changes the way we approach sex and relationship, whether you stand for total abolition, the fact remains that this is someone's job today. This is real work that actual people do. And in the same way that, like, I hope for an end to most jobs in like gas and oil, I hope for an end to most jobs in fast fashion. And also, by the way, the same way that every revolutionary movement has always had at least some buy-in from individuals who are either current or former military or who were cops. If a worker, a lumpen, a disabled person who's incapable of work, a class trader, if any fucking person wants to participate in our movement spaces, we do not have to agree with every aspect of their lives. And as I said before on this episode, it is our fucking responsibility as communists to ensure that they feel safe and welcome. I trust all of our listeners are consenting adults, and now we can move into a conversation about talking about our work experiences, because again, if we are communists, we stand for workers, and more than that, but we stand for workers, and that means we care about the working conditions of every worker who wants to participate in our movement and everyone, because we are here for a better and more equitable world. So I'll get off my tiny soapbox and we can move on.
Thank you for that soapbox. I just want to say, just as a quick follow up to what you just said, regardless of your personal feelings about sex work, I think what we can all agree on is that we want sex workers to be safe
All
and to
workers
have,
deserve
yeah,
dignity. This is somebody's job. And
Absolutely.
again,
yeah,
like I care deeply about the environment.
Yes.
And
Yes.
I live in a part of the world where there's a lot of oil drilling, and I don't think that we should be doing it. But if an oil and gas worker wanted to join my party, I wouldn't be like, abolish your industry before you can come into the door. Like, like,
I'm an oil and gas abolitionist, actually.
me too.
and we, right, and like all, like if you're a worker, again, if you're a worker, if you're a lumpen, if you're disabled, if you're a class trader and you have a bunch of money, right, and you want to come spend it on us, right, you can do so at patreon.com/worldpod. You should, but I think that one of the key themes is like really what we're talking about is like understanding people more deeply and ensuring that everyone who wants to participate feels welcome and feels like they can do that without being scared of how they will be received. And I just really wanted that to come across, because I do think that there are real conversations that need to happen. But so far, I have observed the process of screaming at people in the comments section has not actually moved that needle. And so I'm just offering like something else, of just saying, like, keeping in mind that if you want to be here, like you're a comrade and like you're welcome, so. Okay, if you guys want to talk about work now, then we can all just hug.
I'll jump in again. So I've only really worked in 2 different industries. I spent my entire 20s and early 30s bartending, which is, I mean, it's good money. The hours are terrible. Sexual harassment is extremely normal and just accepted in the bar industry. I also had, the power to tell people to fuck off and kick them out of the bar, which was cool too. But now I am a personal trainer and I am a boxing coach. Yes, I have 2 jobs. You have to have 2 jobs nowadays. My first few years working in the industry, I was at a gym and most of my coworkers were men. It's a very male dominated industry. The fitness industry is, unfortunately. Again, and I think maybe part of it is because I just come off as such an asshole. I never had too much of a problem. I never had any of my male coworkers like talk down to me or like dismiss my education or knowledge or even my like strength. Most of it was just that they were kind of messy and gross. Like, like not wiping down equipment or like not putting things away, right? Like it was just, yeah, I know. Like I have such an aversion to like head sweat, like hair sweat, I think is like the grossest thing. And then more than crotch sweat, I think it's disgusting because it's like greasy. Anyway, a lot of the dudes like just didn't wipe stuff down like after their clients. And that was frustrating. But now I train out of a private studio and the gym that I coach boxing at is an all women's USA boxing gym. It's actually a very special place. There's
Whoa.
only 2 in the entire country. Now there are like fitness boxing gyms that women go to, which I have no problem with that. But we actually have like a competition team that goes to like Golden Gloves tournaments and stuff. So it is like a very special place, and it's amazing how clean an all women's gym is. And also, just for the record, we use the woke definition of women. We have trans women there. We have non-binary people there. The owner is really cool, and if I have to have a boss, it's cool that it's her. And, the staff is all women. Now, don't get me wrong, bitches are gross too. I've cleaned a lot of bar bathrooms, and that is disgusting. But it is cool to be in this environment that I'm in now, where I can train and work with, and then train other people in like what is a very safe all women's space. What
Does
do y'all
anyone
do
else
for
have a
work?
job?
I've had so many jobs. I think I've had like 12 jobs at this point. I guess 13 with YouTube now, but I worked in tech for a while. I was a tech worker for like 6 or 7 years. And I feel like that actually radicalized me a lot because it really sucked. I mean, the money was
Hmm.
great, but it's incredibly stressful. You also are basically, I worked at like a medium, big sized company that's pretty well known, and then a startup, like a tiny startup. And they both had very different problems, but were very problematic nonetheless. And when it came to the startup, it was like maybe like 25, like 30 people working there at any given time. So I had direct access to the CEO all the time and I had to talk to him like constantly. And this guy was a mess. Oh my God, he was the worst. I hated him so much. I literally yelled at him the day that I got laid off in front of the entire office, and they all got taken out to lunch after. So you're welcome for that, fuckers. And then everyone afterwards, like a year after I met up with them, they were like, that was awesome. So obviously everyone appreciated it, but yeah, it was just so like, oh yeah, this is what capitalism is. Like you're literally just beholden to a CEO, no matter how incompetent and full of shit they are. They can literally just undermine your expertise and be like, but I'm the CEO, so what I say goes, and you can't really push back. And like even if you try to push back, they can still be like, no, fuck you. You have to do what I say. I'm literally the CEO. I have your life in my hands, or I guess your job. They can just lay you off at any time, which they did eventually, which was great. But yeah, and then the big company that I worked at also had its problems because it was just so it was the opposite. Like with this one, I had creative freedom, but I also had someone micromanaging me all the time. With the big company, I had no creative freedom because I was a UX designer, a user experience designer, or product designer, or whatever you want to
Mhm.
call it. So I designed apps and stuff. And yeah, the first company I worked at was also a mess.
Okay. Um, you know, the topic of sex work is a big one, and I don't want to even aspire to address all of it today. I'm aware I'm speaking to essentially a lay crowd when it comes to that. I think the few things that I want to say are number one, my reasons for getting into my line of work were explicitly political. That's a whole other can of worms I can get into, and I don't think we have the time and space for that. But I do want to say that as a starting point. I also would like to tell people that I have experienced more harassment in my civilian work and in my civilian personal life than I ever have through my job as a sex worker. If I am objectified in the real world, it is always almost exclusively against my consent. If I'm objectified in my job, it's when I have explicitly opted into being objectified, kind of like you would with a partner. And on top of that, I'm being paid for it. Most women and other sort of female identified people walk through life being objectified against their consent and for free.
Mm.
So not only is your consent being violated, your time and your energy are being taken away from you. You're forced to respond in ways that you may be punished for, and all of that labor, emotional labor, you're doing for free. In my job, I feel that I can opt into all that if I want to, and if I don't want to, I don't have to deal with it, and I get paid. I don't want to universalize my experience. Obviously, not everyone's experience is the same. I am in a privileged position at in this sort of sex work that I do, domination, female domination. When I will say this, when I first started this job, I did not realize that it was sex work, and it appealed to me because I thought it was different from sex work. There's nothing novel. At the time, I thought there was nothing novel or revolutionary about being a female identified person or identified by others. I've always been agender, but a female perceived person and being paid for your sexuality. There was nothing interesting to me about that because that's just the way of the world. And so I came into my this job of female domination because I was told that you could wear big baggy pants, big baggy shirt, no makeup, and tell men what to do, and they'll clean your bathroom for you, and pay you for the privilege and call you goddess. That was different. As it turns out, if you want to make a living, the more that you conventionally sexualize yourself, the better of a living you'll be able to make. And that was really difficult to deal with at first because I was promised something different from this job. But ultimately, I came to accept it as wait a minute, this is something that I've been giving away for free my whole life. Uh, and that is actually the revolutionary thing is I am charging for the thing that I used to be giving away for free. Those are my thoughts under a capitalist system. I think under a communist socialist system under which I lived and under in different communist spaces historically, sex work has been treated differently. But there are also people who want to make it their life's work to provide sexual services, right? Whether your personal politics make you want to believe that or not, that is a fact. Under socialism, there are women and other people of other genders who choose to do sexual work. Historically, the witches and the healers were often also sex workers, right? Like they chose to engage in that work because it suited their needs for in whatever way. We Everyone makes sacrifices at work, I think, and some people sacrifice their bodies on the construction site, and other people choose to use their bodies doing erotic labor, right? I mentioned earlier on that no matter what your personal politics are about sex work, we all want sex workers to be safe. Excuse me. Sex workers around the globe, including in the global South, the global majority, want to be in control of their bodies and what happens to them. Criminalizing sex workers or their clients makes our job unsafe. It introduces the police into our working space. And this is something that is pretty unanimously agreed upon by actual sex workers who are actively working. Um, whatever your politics are, I think it's a little presumptuous to project your own politics onto someone else's life and livelihood. So
No, again, in the same way, if somebody was to put up like an oil rig and I were to say, like, this is creating an environmental hazard, and like, I really believe, I want to be really clear, like, I really believe that that is my opinion. At the same time, if I found out that those people who were working at that oil rig were experiencing unsafe working conditions, were being harassed, if the cops or the military was chasing around them and trying to scare them or to intimidate the other people that they were around, like, I
right.
would say, like, well, whatever I think about this person's job, they are first and foremost a person and therefore deserve to do the work that, like, I don't think that they should be exploited under capitalism, but this is the way that labor is using their body in this moment, and you can feel whatever you want about that, but I want that person to be as safe and to work in as dignified conditions as possible. I don't
Yeah.
think that that's controversial, or at least I hope it's not.
Yeah. I think that that hits on sort of the harm reduction idea, right? That we often hear talked about in the substance use space. In the substance use space, the harm reduction model says that people are going to use substances, so we should make it safe for them to do so. We should make sure they don't overdose. We should provide clean needles, things like that. We can apply, and many people do apply the harm reduction model to sex work. Let us assume that people are going to choose to support themselves through sex work. Let's give them the safe spaces or safe conditions to do so.
I don't want to silence people. It's just that we're coming up on 2 hours, and we made a commitment before coming onto the call that we wouldn't allow this to become the point of the conversation, which I think is like another thing that is often done in and around sex work, was just trying to elevate it to being elevated or delegate it to being this like very unique, specific thing that everyone has to have like a very specific opinion about, whatever you want that to be. And I guess I know that this is like deeply unsatisfying, and honestly, for what it's worth, like, I think for any of this to be fruitful for anyone, like, I really do believe that we need like a cultural revolution. It's been something I've been thinking about since Jen Bignasty said it last time she was on my show, just like to see what any of this is, like the level of relational skills and maturity like needs to increase in the masses, before we could see other conclusions. But like, again, to say it with that, like, the fact remains, like, it is someone's job. They are workers. And if you are a communist, like, I do think that whatever you hope for the future of somebody's industry, that like, I want all workers to be safe. I want all workers to live with dignity. I don't want workers to be harassed
Can
by
I just
cops.
give a plug or a resource? Juno Mack and Molly Smith wrote a book called Revolting Prostitutes. They use our Marxist, feminist, and materialist framework to, I'm going to read a little summary here, to argue that issues within sex work are not unique to the industry, but are instead issues of labor exploitation under capitalism. And one of my favorite lines about sex work is, the problem with sex work is work. So you can Google that line. It'll send you to an interesting podcast episode or whatever. Yeah, from a few years ago. But also look up Juno Mack and Molly Smith, Revolting Prostitutes.
I feel like for all of us, there's a part of our job that involves being on the internet. And so I know that we've sort of touched on the segment that I put of what is it like being a woman on the internet? I don't know if anyone else has anything that they want to add.
All I'm going to say is that before I came out as trans, nobody wrote into the show asking, hey,
Shit.
are Lenore and Jacob a thing? That is one thing that has certainly changed, is like my proximity to a man. Some people are going to assume that defines me, that carries certain connotations, and no, it doesn't. I'm just a woman talking to a man.
So
What a whore.
a whore. I wanted to chime in here because I know my answers have been very I'm the boss and these boys don't fuck with me. And that is in a lot of ways true in my like real life, right? Like, I haven't been catcalled in a long time. I'm in my 40s now. Like, I feel like the men that catcall are looking for like teenagers for the most part, right? Like, I'm past the age where a lot of these guys want to fuck with me, which is freeing in a lot of ways, right? On the internet, though, I can't punch you through a tweet or through like a YouTube comment section, right? So like, existing as a woman online is different for me than in real life in so many ways. Like, it's so much worse. I don't get like rape threats in real life. People don't say shit like that to me, right? I get it online though. People on Twitter say really fucking horrible things because they have that anonymity, right? That protection. You don't know who I am, where I live, you can't come here and punch me in the face. So like at this point, I I just don't engage, right? I am very big on deleting the comment and blocking the person, like, without pushback.
Same.
Yeah, because I mean, if somebody has something, even if they want to disagree with me and be rude about it, but they are at least engaging with whatever the topic of my video or podcast is, I am a lot more open to at least engaging with that. But so many times the comments, they see, this red flag behind me and a throat tattoo, and they just lose their shit, specifically just on like how I look and present myself. But I think it is very important to remember that, like, their problem with me is fully their problem. It has literally nothing to do with like me as a person. And like when I log off, they literally fucking disappear. Like I can delete them and block them and I never have to see these people again. And I think it's really important for anybody to remember that, right? That it's not your problem, it's their problem, their own biases and stuff, and that like you really can just block them and they really do fucking disappear.
But also, male listeners, think about who you're always talking on the internet. You guys, first of all, the internet is public. Wait, no. I actually feel really strongly about this. No, here I go. Back on the soapbox. Hand me my soapbox. The internet is public and it's free.
Mhm.
And the people who are reading the comments are not always the person that you're attacking. And I want to remind you again, if you are sending these negative, hateful comments, DMs are a separate issue. Fuck you. You shouldn't be violent to people in the DMs. Please stop. But if you are making these kinds of comments, these cruel things that you're saying on the internet in the comment section, there is, I promise you, because I was that person, there is somebody who is considering joining a communist organization, who is trying to read Marx, who is trying to educate themselves, who is looking up to you, to the content that you're putting out, and they look in the DMs and they go, I do not want to be a part of this organization. These people scare me. These people are fucking insane. When you're every single time I see someone in our comments call somebody else an R slur, I'm like, Lenin is rolling in his fucking grave that somebody is like considering joining these spaces, right? So if somebody asks a question and it's in bad faith, if somebody says something unkind, of course, delete them, block them. If somebody asks a question, even if it's an aggressive tone, the line that we take on Proles is like, I'm not answering that question for the person who's asking. I'm
Right.
answering it for the person who is afraid to ask. And so I'm going to answer that question in good faith as though it is being asked genuinely. I understand it is hard not to be an animal on the internet. I understand how infuriating it is, how frustrating it is. And also, like, our movement is so fragile and so tenuous. Again, I want to remind everybody that COVID was a mass disabling event. There are so many comrades who want to participate, and the online is the only thing they have. So Jen's experience, so where Jen Big Nasty gets to go to spaces in the real world and people treat her with dignity and respect, and then she goes on the internet, there are people who do not have the option for the real world, and they care very much about participating, and they look at us and they think that we're fucking scary. And so actually, I do feel really seriously and really strongly about this. I do not get a lot of the flack. Obviously, I get called, the woman is insufferable, the woman is so stupid. It completely overrides the contributions that I make to the show, because apparently I'm just annoying. Hey, by the way, I'm almost 40. I know somebody's told me before you, but I just like look at these comments and I just keep thinking all the time, like, there's somebody right now who's 20 years old, or there's somebody right now who's 35 years old and they're disabled and they can't leave their house much of the time. And like, your comments are what they see. And I'm not trying to like overstate this, but this is people's real world, or people are from a very conservative place where they do have a real life, but they don't know anyone who is participating in left organizing. Maybe they know some people in a union in their very right-wing place, and they're like looking at us like, I'm so like, be so for real. So if you're posting, if you want to be rude, if you cannot stop yourself from being a troll on the internet, please, for the love of God, make a Finsta. If your account says anything public about the organization that you're a part of, if you're following a bunch of communist accounts, if you want to identify yourself as part of this movement on the internet, you need to show up and act respectfully. And if you cannot, might I suggest going to one of Jen Big Nasty's boxing classes so that you can blow off some steam? Might I suggest Sudoku? Might I suggest a friend? I'm really sorry. I will get off my soapbox now, but I really do feel really strongly about people's conduct on the internet. I think you're right, Jen Big Nasty, to say that I can close my phone, I can block those people, but there are other people who can't, and they're trying to learn, and this is the only resource that they have. Okay, as we come to the end, and by the way, as of recording this, listeners, I don't know how long the final the final show will be. We're coming up on 2 hours and 15 minutes. Is there anything that you feel like men can be doing, and I didn't put this in the original outline, and it did come up a little bit in our episode thus far, but like anything that you feel like men are doing that you want to say, hey, do
Aw.
more of that, or other things that men could be doing to make our spaces um, more welcoming.
Me being a big scary dominatrix and everything, I just want to give a shout out to all the men I have known who are fucking sweethearts while being masculine as fuck, some of them, and some of them not being that masculine, but just like treat me like a total human being, regardless of my sex or gender, and are just normal human beings towards me. Like, that is the best thing that they can do, and the best thing that the men in my life have done for me is just be just cool human beings towards me and other women.
Yeah, treat women like people. Don't write off feminine interests as inherently reactionary or anti-communist. Like, I see that so much, and it's so cringe. Like, I would never, yeah, I mean, we were talking about this earlier, but I would never be like, oh my god, you like football? That's like so counter-revolutionary.
Even though,
Mhm.
by
Like,
the
don't you
way, it
know that men are
is
getting
like
like
American football
TBIs?
is kind of
For real.
revolutionary.
Right, right. But I mean, if people want to like it, whatever.
Of
I'm not going to try
course.
to stop them. Like, live and let live. I feel like reading bell hooks would probably be a good start for some men also. And just
She's
reading more feminist literature, just engaging more with feminism. And I don't mean like liberal, like girl boss, Andrea Dworkin type of
no.
feminism. I mean like revolutionary shit. Bell hooks, revolting prostitutes, you know. There's a bunch of like good texts out there that they could read and just engage with and understand and be empathetic towards women and gender marginalized people and all that.
Also, especially if you're a man who's doing a lot of negative comments, now that you've listened to me, thank you so much for listening to women and women adjacent. I know that now that you're not leaving those mean comments, you have a lot of free time on your hands. And so you can use that to watch video essays, for example, like Rev Thoughts or other video essays. You can like learn about women. If you don't have a lot of like friends in general, but especially if you don't have a lot of like women friends or non-binary friends, I'm not saying I don't think you should force your friendship on those people, but you might want to like really sit with yourself and contemplate like, I wonder why they don't feel safe with me. I wonder what I could be doing to be friendlier, to be more welcoming. And if you're a part of an organization that has meetings, I do think that you should move towards some of the things that I said before. If you can arrange for childcare. If not, at the very least, be mindful that it is overwhelmingly women who have to arrange for childcare. So ensure that your meetings start and end on time. I understand for security reasons, sometimes you can't have online options, but in the event that you can, that would also be great. Anything that you can do to meet people's physical ability, you know what I mean, to ensure that immunocompromised people, that chronically ill people, that people who have specific needs, like a lot of those can be met very easily. Some of them are more challenging, but a lot of them are very easy, and some of them there are solutions. And so making sure that you're actually asking people, we've said this on previous episodes again when we were talking specifically about disability, but again, disproportionately affects women often. So asking is really good. Hey, if you ask in earnest, if hey, I know sometimes men and people of all genders, but often with men feel like they can't demonstrate vulnerability or curiosity or whatever. So like I think we like asking. I think we
Mhm.
I think asking is cool. If you ask in good faith with somebody with whom you have some degree of comfortability, um, I think leading with the humility of like, man, I just realized I didn't know about this, or that I wanted to know more, or that I hadn't thought about some things. I'm really sorry about that, but I'm
Mhm.
trying. Like, can you help me out? Can you talk me through this? I think they will. So you can do that with your free time when you're not leaving mean comments.
I just want to say for the men listening that capitalism relies on other systems of oppression and dominance, such as
Mm.
patriarchy, to reproduce itself. Commenting exactly on this whole invisibilized care work that is done, like capitalism relies on that is very patriarchal. So it's they're like, it's not like they're excluded from each other. Like, you don't, like, to be a communist, it's not that like all of a sudden, you know, this whole patriarchy doesn't exist. It's that exactly it's part of that
They
capitalism.
co-arise. White supremacist,
Yes.
patriarchal capitalism co-arise. They're an interlocked phenomenon
They're
that co-arise.
interlocked. Yes, they're interlocked. So like us
Mhm, mhm.
speaking about this is as well being anti-capitalist within itself. So I think that that is one
Mhm.
point, and also the fact that we discuss this and all of the topics that have been touched today, it's not like an attack towards you or your experience as
Hopefully, if
a
you've been
working
listening for the
class.
last
Yeah.
2 hours, you don't feel that way.
Yes.
I mean, unless that's your
Yes.
thing. Hey,
But
we're
like,
not trying
it's
to
not
shame
like
you if
I
it
feel
is.
like the moment that it's touched, like they feel like, oh, but I have also experienced hardship as a person from the working class or for class dominance, and it's like, yes, we're not invisibilizing this, like it's not an attack on that, but it is also saying like, yes, but there are also these other dimensions that also need to be like looked at and not invisibilized. So I feel that that is an important aspect of it, and that's about it. And you know, hug people more, I guess.
Not me. Please don't hug me.
Not you. You have only
Consensually, ask for
yes,
permission.
yes. I guess I'm
Mhm.
like from this like very Latin
I saved
culture,
hug.
so I feel
I
like
saved hug for
yes,
marriage. I just want to be clear.
we've also discussed like living in a Latin based place. Like there is this whole thing of, you know, if you have not hugged me 3 times on this occasion, like, are you mad at me? What's going on? So yes, like me and my personal
And the answer is
experience
yes.
being cured, yes. And the answer is yes. Like if you have not hugged me 3 times, why? Is there something happening? So yes, I do have like a tendency to speak a lot about hugs, but yes, of course,
Speaking of
consensually.
Latin America and how I saved hug for marriage, my husband, the people's husband, they're not coming for your toothbrush or your toilet paper, but we do in fact all share one husband, and it's my husband. Said, you know, to include, it was actually his idea to include. He's like, listen, you don't have to cater to anyone, but maybe include, you know, the examples that you could look for. And I am going to. I am going to name some people that I think, you know, we should be looking to. And also I want to name, I think part of the fragility and the challenges embedded within our current understandings of that which we may call masculinity rely on the fact that masculinity needs to continue to see itself represented. The idea that you need a role model in order to behave a certain way is something that the vast majority of people do not have the privilege to see what they're looking for to be in the world. And frankly, as revolutionaries, neither do we. Of course, I am an amateur historian on this podcast. And so I care very much about looking back to the past to see what we can leverage for the future. And also, I understand that I am co-creating with all of my comrades a better world. And part of what we're building is something that we haven't seen yet. So you cannot use the excuse that you don't know who to look at. And part of that is the problem that you continue to need to see things. And frankly, it is anti-Marxist because Marx had to rely on Hegel. Right? Marx had to rely on a bunch of liberals in order to come across that which today we call Marxism. So you can participate in that revolutionary tradition of creating that which you want to see in the world. That said, obviously, I will shout out my husband, the people's husband. I will shout out all my co-hosts who treat me with a great deal of love and kindness and dignity, and who we have had to struggle through certain things that I'm not suggesting they said something to me because of my gender. I'm saying that because I am the gender diversity prole, I experience some of the things that they say in a specific way. And we've had to work through that. Obviously, I already mentioned Brett O'Shea, Adnan Hussein. I think that there are so many people in this space that we can look to. At least, obviously, I don't like spend all day with these guys. I don't know that we look to on the internet, the way that they model what it means to be a person in the world. Somebody else who we'll be speaking to soon is a man named Matthew Remski, whose work I've been following for a very long time. He's somebody that you could look at. He's releasing a book called Anti-Fascist Dad, and maybe you can pick that up. I'm not sure if it'll be out by the time we present this, but that is also another resource. Does anyone have any final things that they think men could be doing before we close out?
Yeah, I mean, Ray, you and Pama, you've essentially touched on this already. But yeah, if you're, especially if you're cishet white man, cultivate friendships with people who are not. You know, absent any baggage or expectation beyond, you know, friendship. Talk to them, you know, as you would your male friends, like with the same humility of, hey, if I say some fuck shit, I should be expected to be called on it. and especially make friends with trans women, because maybe you might find something about yourself.
Ooh, and I just wanted to add on to what Ray was saying, was that I think it's really important for people to be themselves and love themselves, because I saw this really great illustration the other day that said that responsibility to the collective involves responsibility to yourself. Do you love yourself enough to create a better world? And like, whether you're masculine or feminine or whatever, and whether you're adhering to gender norms, like, literally none of that shit matters. Just be who you are, even if that means being a feminine man, or maybe you're a super mask man, or maybe you're not a man at all. Who fucking cares? Be who you are and love yourself and love the collective, because it's all intertwined. Nature is determined and connected. Everything is connected. How you treat yourself is how you treat the collective, and vice versa.
That about does it for this one. Keep listening after the outro for a preview of the Patreon exclusive Slumber Party bonus episode. Thanks so much to all of our guests today, and to all of our listeners and Patreon subscribers. The newest ones are Kat Bleen, Trill Turban, Shy, Stygian, Leo SW, Sam, Aziz Ahmed Khan, Carl Snake Emoji, and Peter P. And a very special shout out to our Vanguard patrons: Pearlsdog, Jordan C., Chauncey, Classy Antagonism, Audie Gem, The Leninist Lawyer, Lumpenprol, The Winking Cossack, and Alex D. Once again, if you'd like to subscribe, you can do so at patreon.com/pearlspod for free. If you have any questions, comments, or episode ideas, please email us at pearlspod@outlook.com. Please follow, review, like, all the algorithm stuff, and we'll see you in 2 weeks. May the specter haunt your streets, and solidarity forever. Death to America.
Wow,
Fantastic
outro.
outro.
Yeah.
Who will start this next round? P. Marks, do you want to choose who will start?
Can I nominate you to answer a truth or trivia?
Well, you can, but I have all of the questions and answers.
So? Oh, and
That's
answers.
true.
Okay. Well, then do a truth. You have to do a truth.
Okay. Okay, so the next one is, which one of us do you think would survive the zombie apocalypse, and which one would die first?
That's amazing.
It's actually really sad, because like Lenore probably has to die first, because the trans woman always dies first in the zombie apocalypse, which it like is so tragic, because like she probably would otherwise stay alive the longest.
We don't have to follow narrative tropes. We can evaluate this as a real world question.
Okay, real world. This is real world woke zombies. Okay, obviously I would die first. Like, I just want to be clear. One, my will to live is extremely tenuous. Two, I have very few survival skills. So like I would eat first, and I have like a lot of sensory problems. So I would probably just like preempt it and take myself out, because the idea of like that like vague space between life and death, when the zombie would be like chomping on you and I would still be alive for it, I feel like it would be both moist and also kind of like sandpaper, and maybe also mucusy. And I don't think that I could survive that. So I would die first, in which case, yeah, Lenore, you would have a chance. Congrats.
Probably.
Congrats. In our woke zombie future, I think Rev thought similar to me, probably going to give up pretty quickly.
Yeah.
I think Pame is reasonably tall and could probably hoof it pretty far, but would eventually succumb. I also feel like, Pame, that in a really stressful situation, if the zombies were really close, you would accidentally be like, ah! Like, I think that you have like an air of the fainting couch about you.
Oh my God. Sam's like a damsel in distress.
Yeah, I think that at the end it would come down to Princess Marks and Lenore. I'm going to be honest, Princess Marks, I think that you were not, like, you didn't know it was coming, and my guess is that like it would be a wardrobe malfunction, like you would not be imminently dressed for the zombie apocalypse.
Hilarious. Also incorrect. I am, in fact, a prepper, come from a hunting family on both sides, have lived in the village, have hunted myself.
Okay, so
and I would protect all of you, and you could all come into my bunker. Okay.
Princess Marks is gonna take Lenore out with a fucking bow and arrow and eat her.
Why? Why would I do that? There's no need for that.
Why are we killing each other?
We will all be in the bunker. Plot twist.
Zombies are after
Zombies
us.
die.
Unfortunately, when I was picking out trans girl archetypes, I did not roll gun enthusiast, so I don't have a whole hell of a lot else going for me in an apocalypse situation.
Guys, your greatest resource in any stressful situation is your brain. Or your,
Unless the
That's why
zombie
the
is
zombies
eating
want it.
it.
yes.
Eat that. They want to eat that. It tastes good.
Yum, yum.
They envision the entire world Sovietized, communist style. Communist style. Communist style. Communist style. Communist style.
Stalin.
Soviet retro.
Communist style. Communist style.
Soviet retro.
Communist style. Communist style.
Soviet retro. Soviet retro.
Communist style. Communist style.
Soviet retro.